On this video, we are going to break down what's happened in World Cup qualifying in the last 4 months on every single continent. There'll be a chapter for it. We'll break down the most intense matches, the best players, the biggest surprises, biggest disappointments, and who is already through and who could go through. What's the path forward in the areas of the world where that still is very much a thing. But first, a reminiscence. So I'm a huge nerd for international play. People often ask me how, as an American, I got into the world's game. Well, the actual answer to that is somebody bought me one of those DS games, like on the little, on a DS, a Nintendo DS. They bought me a DS game, and it was the 2006 World Cup game. And I went, all these countries have a team? This was mind-blowing to me. Like every sport we play in the United States outside of football / soccer / foosball is just in the United States. And so the ability to have this world competition, it just kind of blew my mind that all of these countries had teams. As such, I've always been in love with it. And so as a passion project, I made a complete guide to World Cup qualifying, and you guys seem to love it. So World Cup qualifying has progressed a lot in the last 4 months. A bunch of teams have qualified for the World Cup, a bunch of disappointments have been cataloged, and yet CONCACAF is still nowhere near finishing. The good news is, since you liked it so much, who am I kidding? I was gonna make this video anyways, but hey, roll the thing. If you have not watched my guide to World Cup qualifying, I would recommend that first, because it will explain the different formats in more detail than I'm going to explain it in this video, assuming that you already basically know what's going on. We talked about it at the beginning of the video, but what you're going to get in each of these chapters is the best matches from qualifying in each of these continents. I've been tracking it for the last couple of months. I'm pathologically addicted and a huge nerd for this stuff. We're also going to talk about the teams that have qualified, and we'll point out the teams that still could qualify and look at the route forward. But we'll spend a lot of our time in section 1 talking about what the heck has happened and why there was so much drama in Africa. But in order to get there, we have to go in the same order that we did in this video so we can do the most important last part, which is make fun of my predictions. That's going to require these because I will be watching myself at various points. We start in Asia, which I said we go in alphabetical order, and technically we are, because Asia's federation is AFC, which is ahead of Africa's federation. So commenters, I can read. Asian Group A looked like it was going to be pretty straightforward. Iran, South Korea, and then a really significant drop off to what I said was either Syria or Iraq competing for the 3rd spot. Then of course there's a second group, there's Group B, it's another 6 teams, and it looked pretty straightforward too. And Saudi Arabia's been slipping. They might not have lost in the group stages, but Saudi Arabia hung a draw with Palestine and a draw with Yemen in the previous round. The Saudis also looked really bad at the last World Cup. And so I'm going to go Japan, and then an Australian team that's been really up and down, but has looked solid in this qualifying campaign. So I was all excited. I thought the Asia's pretty cut and dry, and then literally the first match that comes across after I dropped that video the next day, Oman goes into Japan and freaking beats Japan. It's like they had the video on and they knew that I said that they had no players that you would recognize. So they go in and they beat Japan. South Korea draws with Iraq. So I guess that made me look smart in that regard, but still a couple of crazy results. The Iraqis have to be feeling really good after the draw. Oman gets a win and Japan is kind of down in the dumpster. But something to keep an eye on is that Saudi Arabia starts with a win against the Vietnamese team that even at this stage that I'm talking to you now has 0 points in the group stage. So I guess I was at least right about Vietnam. In the next round of matches, the usual customers kind of caught their stride and you were figuring things were going to completely go back to normal. There still have been some significant hiccups in Asian qualifying so far. And the biggest surprise personally for me is that Saudi Arabia, after drawing Palestine and Yemen in the previous round, just came out on fire. Not only did they win their first game, they went out and beat Japan. In the next game, they come out in the next game and beat China. They draw Australia. In Australia, the Saudis all of a sudden becoming the best team in the group, which is a significant problem for either Japan or Australia, because if you look at the group, there are 2 automatic qualifying spots. The 3rd one has to go through 2 rounds of playoffs in order to get themselves into the World Cup. You do not want to be there because absolutely anything can happen. happen. Japan did right the ship with some wins over China, Vietnam, and Oman. They do not look like they're at their best, but that's going to be enough. All of those wins by 1 goal, by the way, to get them through to the World Cup, probably. They're just not setting a very high standard. Saudi Arabia is, and yesterday, Australia went out and drew against China, which dropped it from automatic position to the playoff position. Here are the tables after 6 games, which is where we stand right now. There'll be more matches in January. And Group A is playing out largely as I predicted. Iran and South Korea, despite South Korea with the early hiccup draw, neither has lost. Both have been flying away. There's no difference between first and second in the group. You're going to get automatic qualification. The surprise in Group B is Saudi Arabia with 5 wins and a draw. The draw being away to Australia, which is an incredibly respectable result. Japan, to its credit, after a loss against Oman that had every single alarm bell going off, has turned things around to win 4 of its next 5, albeit not against the good teams necessarily. They did beat Australia, and that matters because Australia is on the outside looking in. Who would they play, you ask? That is the United Arab Emirates, led by the indomitable leading goal scorer of Asian qualifying, Ali Mabkout. He has 12 goals in qualification in Asia, and he's continued to bag a lot of goals. The United Arab Emirates has won just 1 game, but they have shown a ridiculous determination to draw games against all the odds. And that is where we point out my match of qualifying in Asia. And I pretty darn sure it will not be topped. I mentioned I thought Iraq or Syria was going to be competing for that playoff spot, and in this situation you'd be playing Australia, which would not be ideal. You'd be the underdog no matter which of these teams it is. But Iraq has 4 draws and has not been able to muster a win. Syria with 2 draws and a really disappointing 4 defeats. And the Lebanese have surprised by picking up 5 points, not a team that's usually accustomed to even being at this stage. But it was the United Arab Emirates and Iraq in the UAE that played perhaps the most absurd match that I've seen in Asia in a long time. I went through and watched the highlights. We can't show you those because I do enjoy being able to pay our editor, but they are not hard to find if you Google them, and I would highly recommend it because the Iraqi national team scored an own goal and then an 89th minute goal in the UAE to take the lead and look like they were going to pick up this absolutely massive 3 points at the UAE. But then the aforementioned indomitable Ali Mabkout swooped in the 93rd minute, scored the goal. All the dudes in the white outfits, they actually were literally wearing those in the stands. It's awesome. The vibe is immaculate. The UAE going nuts because they rescued yet another draw. That being said, watching the UAE play, I don't think they'd stand much of a chance against Australia, but a huge credit to their national setup for being able to put together a team good enough to put themselves in that position. I mean, 4 matches to go. I didn't see this coming. The issue is Iraq is more than capable of actually winning a match and multiple down the stretch. I mean, they started by drawing South Korea. So the UAE probably isn't going to be safe unless it can actually go win another match or 2. That might be a bit too much to ask. But the point is, unlike Group B, where Oman is going to have to try and catch Australia in order to get into the playoff, which they're doing a lot better than a lot of people thought they would, but Oman's still pretty far away. China's basically already cooked. Everybody's still in it in Group A. If Syria goes and wins a game, they're alive because everybody is drawing. Look at the draw column in Group A. Anyways, the match to circle on your calendar, 1, January 27th, probably the best derby that you've never watched. Iran, Iraq will be going down. It was 3-0 to Iran last time, but the crowd's always bumper. Yes, the crowd. It's just an absolutely tremendous match to watch. I'd recommend you circle that and write it down. And if Iraq can get a result, that could certainly launch them into being in playoff contention. But if you want to watch the matches that have peak drama, here are my 2 recommendations. Australia and Japan play each other on March 24th, and as long as both teams hold serve, they should be 1 point apart with automatic qualification on the line. That is going to be super, super juicy. And the battle for the playoff spot in Group A, Iraq and the United Arab Emirates in Iraq, is going to be going down on the same day. So check those games out, and we are on to our next continent. I think I'm going to switch apps. You guys let me know in the comments which app you think does a better job of displaying what we are trying to look at. Now, where Asia is generally pretty straightforward and you have to hunt specifically for the drama, Africa is bumping. African qualification is brutal. There are a bunch of solid teams in Africa that you either know are solid or don't. And there are 10 groups, and you have to win the group. and one of the groups has Cameroon and Ivory Coast in it. So one of them is already out of World Cup qualifying, and you maybe didn't even know that. The first group, what I have to say, this Burkina Faso team is good. They made the Africa Cup of Nations final less than 10 years ago. They are the only team with a shot at Algeria in this group, and it is a shot. And I was freaking right. I mean, look at this. Burkina Faso did absolutely everything it could. It didn't lose, but it also drew Niger and drew Algeria twice. It came down to the final day, and this is why you need to watch the stream. I've got a Twitch channel. The link is actually down in the description. We were keeping track of this live. Algeria and Burkina Faso played on the final day of qualifying, and if Burkina Faso had won, they would have gone to the final round of African qualifying, but alas, it was a 2-2 draw. Burkina Faso came from behind twice to level it. They were playing in Algeria, and the Burkinabés, am I right? Okay. They fought fiercely, but it was not enough. And Algeria, despite, drawing 2 matches against Burkina Faso and beating everybody else, was sweating this out until the end. Next group. Oh, by the way, the good news is that all of the groups are done, which means the final round is set, and which means I can speak with finality about who's going through and who's out. Group B, I obviously found interesting from the beginning because Zambia's got good players, Mauritania's got good players. The team I didn't think about having good players is Equatorial Guinea. And the match I want to focus on here is match day 5, because Equatorial Guinea went out and beat Tunisia with a goal that came late from a dude named Guinea. Strangely accurate. That put Tunisia and Equatorial Guinea in a situation where they were tied on points going into the last match day. And Equatorial Guinea was playing Mauritania, who'd been bitterly disappointing and hadn't won a match yet. And Tunisia was playing Zambia, who also still had a chance to qualify because they were on 7 points. If Guinea loses, right, and they beat Tunisia, then all of a sudden Zambia could find itself in the final round. So it was absolute bedlam until the actual match day started. Then Tunisia went 3-up on Zambia. Equatorial Guinea went behind to Mauritania. They eventually pulled it back to a draw, but Tunisia pulled away on the last day with a convincing win against Zambia to grab the spot as I predicted. But sheesh, dude, come on. Group ended up being difficult, but I had no idea why it was going to be difficult. It was Equatorial Guinea that got that close. They win and Tunisia doesn't against a good Zambian team. Things look different. Of course, they look this way. Alas, then there is Group C, and this looked like a Nigerian walkover, but it turned into a Nigerian nightmare. They lost in Lagos to the Central African Republic, and if you've noticed something about African qualifying, if you actually go out and lose, it's going to be pretty hard to qualify. And things got incredibly dicey because Cape Verde's only loss was against Nigeria in the first time that they met, and Cape Verde went out and took care of all sorts of business everywhere else. All of that except for the fact that they actually drew the Central African Republic, which is something that will come back to haunt them. Despite that early setback, Cape Verde was still able to apply pressure on Nigeria and darn near knock Nigeria out of the World Cup. That's what was going on. The match was played in Nigeria, final day of qualifying. Cape Verde and Nigeria, and both teams scored inside the opening 5 minutes. Victor Osimhen scored in the first minute, and then Cape Verde came back with a guy named Stapira. He scored in the 5th minute. One more goal from Cape Verde, and Nigeria is done. Cooked. Not even in the final round of qualifying. Fire the coaching staff, clean out the team, and start over. But then we played the entire rest of the match without a goal. And all that we'll realize in the end is that Nigeria is going to be in the final round of African qualifying, but they were certainly uncomfortable. But it's the 4th group that captured the imagination in an insane way. The Ivory Coast missed the last World Cup. They've been struggling a little bit, but they obviously still have a boatload of talent. They come up against a Cameroonian team that is just darn good. It's a balanced team. They have solid players at basically every position. Cameroon is one of those countries like Nigeria where even if they don't have star power, they still actually have a very good team. And it all boiled down to the last day where Cameroon and Ivory Coast were a point apart. The Ivory Coast had 4 wins and a draw. Cameroon had 4 wins and a loss. That loss was in the last match against Ivory Coast. They go ahead and play each other on the last day of qualifying because that's apparently the only way this sort of stuff works in Africa, and it's settled early. Karl Toko Akambe scoring in the 21st minute to put Cameroon through. And for the 2nd consecutive World Cup, we will play without Ivory Coast. And to me, that's really sad. It's a team that has a lot of talent, but look, if you're not in the top 10 in Africa when it comes to world ranking, you're gonna get drawn out of the second pot. It's very unlucky for Cameroon to have to deal with that sort of thing, but they dealt with it, they got through it, they split the matches. They didn't draw another match in the group, which Ivory Coast did on their opening day, and they're through. So Cameroon is into the final round, but after a baptism by fire, Ivory Coast tied for the most points of a second place finishing team in African qualifying. Next was Group E, and this was the first of our complete washes. After all the drama of the first four groups, Mali, as I predicted, obviously winning this group isn't going to guarantee you a trip to your first ever World Cup, but it's got to be Mali. This is their chance. Absolutely walk the group. This is a team that didn't allow a goal for all 6 matches. They have never been to the World Cup, and they will go to the playoff with my full fandom and support because I always want a team to be at the World Cup for the first time. In Group F, you had Egypt waltzing all over the Fighting Aubameyang's and company. There was really never a nervous moment, even though Egypt dropped 2 matches with draws. There just wasn't another team in the group that elevated itself to compete with Egypt. I mean, 14 points. Cameroon had 15 points, and they were sweating bullets all the way to the end of that last match. Egypt just didn't have a worthy contender. Gabon ends up finishing second, but they were a mile off. Group G, however, was not like those other groups. Not like other girls. Group G came down to so much controversy that one of the teams is filing a formal protest over what happened. That team would be South Africa. South Africa was cooking. They started, like every other team apparently, with a draw against a team they had no business drawing in Zimbabwe. They then went out and beat Ghana, beat Ethiopia twice, and beat Zimbabwe, which put South Africa in a position with 4 wins and a draw ahead of Ghana. Not only had Ghana lost to South Africa, they'd also drawn Ethiopia in their second to last match. This meant that all that South Africa needed was a draw, and they would eliminate the Ghanaian national team and advance to the final stage of African qualifying. And there were 2 things that happened in this match that were absolutely brutal. One, a penalty call of dubious acclaim. I'm not going to be able to reenact it, but it was a soft penalty, hand on the shoulder, and the guy went down like a sack of rocks. Not only that, South Africa scored a goal that was ruled out and flagged for offside, even though the player, and I'm not good at this sort of thing live. I didn't think he was onside live, but when you watch the replay, he was onside. So South Africa had a disallowed goal and had a penalty called against it that was just it wasn't very good. It was a very tight, nervous game, as you expect from these sorts of affairs, but Ghana, the Black Stars, do actually get through despite some really, really dangerously bad results. They do get through to the final round of African qualifying, but who knows how good they'll be when they get there. For South Africa, still haven't been to the World Cup since 2010 when they hosted. This is a really bitter pill to swallow. Fortunately, for those that don't like nervous moments, Senegal made absolutely easy work of Group H, as was projected. Togo with a respectable second place finish, but they never really threatened Senegal, who only dropped points in a 1-1 draw to Togo, while Togo was busy losing to Namibia. The same can be said for Group I, where Guinea promptly descended into a civil war upon the beginning of World Cup qualifying, and so the second pot team in this group became a non-factor, and Morocco won all 6 games with a plus 19 goal difference. Next! All right. Next is Group J, which will be Dr. Congo, Benin, Tanzania, and Madagascar. As I said, this one should have been easy. The final group, Group J, is a handover to DR Congo in a way that no other group is. Well, guess what? It wasn't. DR Congo promptly dug itself a giant hole and then miraculously escaped. Dr. Congo started its qualifying within 4 days of each other, drawing Tanzania and Benin. You might be able to find Tanzania on a map. If you tell me you can find Benin on a map, I can. That's because I'm sitting here all day. But you? Just kidding. I have faith in you. It's in West Africa. It's like really skinny. Here, show them. Globe. Whew. There it is. DR Congo then recovered with a win against Madagascar and then promptly lost to Madagascar. Yes, the animals. After what I can only assume is a rousing speech, DR Congo then beat Tanzania 3-0 to try and set itself up well for the final showdown, the final boss, which out of Tanzania and Madagascar, the one team I didn't expect to be here, much in the same fashion as Equatorial Guinea, is freaking Benin, who showed out at the beginning. They beat Madagascar, then drew DR Congo, then then beat Tanzania, then lost to Tanzania, but man, if they'd won that match, then they actually would have clinched qualification before the final match against DR Congo. So there's a regrettable incident against Tanzania. They go into the final match. Benin needs a win or a draw, and they're going to the last round of qualifying instead of Dr. Congo. But the Democratic Republic of the whatever Congolese... There's too many words. Make it shorter. Benin is, I like Benin more. It's 5 letters. Dr. Congo showed up and actually won that last match 2-0, ending the incredible and almost occurring Benin dream into the final round. I can only imagine the scenes in Porto Novo. So the 10 group winners go into 2 pots that are based off of world ranking. This according to Sports News Africa. This stuff is surprisingly hard to figure out because FIFA's website is basically like using a 2005 computer. The first seeded teams are Senegal, Tunisia, Algeria, Nigeria, and Morocco. They're in pot 1. Then in pot 2, you have Egypt, Ghana, Cameroon, DR Congo, and Mali. So those are the 5 teams that are going to get drawn against the other 5 teams. You win your home and away tie, and you're through. The draw is in December. It's in Doha. That is my recommended game to watch, is to tune into the draw. It's on the 18th of December. It's in Qatar, obviously. So what actually was the best match in African qualifying? I'm gonna go with Central African Republic winning in Nigeria against Nigeria. Central African Republic had nothing to play for even at that point in the qualifying. They found that bit of magic that you can get in international competition where for one night, for some reason, the boys from Central African Republic were able to go to Lagos and win. And boy, did they. They put the entire country of Nigeria on alert and hopefully gave their nation a night of being able to celebrate their team that otherwise wasn't able to put together much in the way of pretty. The surprising team that could still qualify is Mali. It's always going to be Mali until it's not. Every other team on this list has made the World Cup before. Mali hasn't. DR Congo made it as Zaire, but it still counts in the record book. And let's be real, based off their performance in the last round, I don't think DR Congo has much of a chance. Mali, on the other hand, has a real good chance. But that is where we leave the story of Africa for now. And we head to my home domain of CONCACAF. Unfortunately, CONCACAF is just one 8-team table, and so we can actually just watch what I thought was going to happen. I think Canada's scary and is the surprise. Ha ha! I was right. Canada is the surprise. Have you seen this table? Are you paying attention to CONCACAF? You might not be, but can I get a little Oh, Canada, our home and native land. Canada is top of the group with 16 points after a barrage of 8 matches in 4 months. They are the only team that has not lost. They have pulled out draws in the United States and in the Azteca. And they also just pulled off maybe my favorite result in qualifying outside of the United freaking States, beating Mexico. Woo! Which was Canada beating Mexico. And they decided to do it in the most Canadian way possible. They went up to Edmonton in negative degree, doesn't matter what, Celsius or Fahrenheit, negative wind chill in a snowy night in the middle of central Alberta, and they kicked them around the yard and beat them 2-1. Canada is for real. And you know who they remind me of? Those good Australian teams that had Timmy Cahill up top. Because Canada has a wall of faceless, nameless guys that are just solid. They play together. They understand the system. They play all over the place. Look at the Canadian national team on Wikipedia. Look at all the different places these guys are playing in. Then you sprinkle in some legit quality. Jonathan David, Alphonso Davies. You've got the all-time caps leader, Atiba Hutchinson, who's still doing a great job. He is captain material all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. And young bright stars like Tajon Buchanan, who are just lovely to watch with the ball. Canada's for real, man. In a way that kind of scares me as an American, but they are top of the group. The United States is checked in at second with a typically up and down qualifying campaign that started with a freaking heart-stopping draw at El Salvador. I got mad respect for El Salvador. I think they're going to make the World Cup in 2026, but not right now, please. Then we drew against Canada, and finally we beat Honduras after going down 1-0. The United States has continued to battle through annoying adversity and eventually made its way into a wonderful night in Cincinnati where it beat Mexico 2-0. Mexico on its way to losing consecutive matches and returning to the pack in CONCACAF. Mexico's talking about firing its manager. It's currently sitting in third, rather uncomfortably tied with Panama, which is going to make me look really foolish because I couldn't shut up and I said this. Panama has been awful recently. They made the World Cup by the skin of their teeth with an old gold generation like Blas Perez and stuff. All those guys are too old to be effective anymore. I think Panama flames out into the bottom of the octagonal. Or they play their way into fourth and are currently in a playoff position with 5 points of cushion. Jamaica has had some issues. Look, they didn't get what they needed from that international pool. Mikel Antonio, Leon Bailey, and Kamar Roof are there, but with the different COVID situations, with injuries to at times all three of those guys, Jamaica's not really been able to put together a great campaign. Costa Rica is always solid, but they lack any sort of star power. The real disappointment is Honduras, who seems to have an incredible knack for taking the lead and then finding a way to lose. They can't play any defense. El Salvador has gotten a point out of at least half of its games. Really surprisingly competitive, and I expect them to, despite their poor form, finish strong and steal some points from people that are hopefully not the United States. But as promised, your match of the tie, I give you the match in Edmonton. Canada beating Mexico to announce itself at the top of the group as a legit contender for an automatic World Cup qualifying spot. I knew they were going to be dangerous. I didn't know they were going to be beat us or Mexico dangerous. Fortunately, we haven't lost to Canada yet, but we do play away to Canada in January. And that is my match to watch out for because it's going to be cold. If you want to watch people playing in the snow, surrounded by Canadians, mainlining maple syrup under 6 layers while singing "Oh Canada," that match in January is going to be for you. The surprise team that could qualify is definitely Los Canaleros. It means Canal Boys, or when you put it in Google Translate, the Gutter Boys, but they're talking about the Panama Canal. A team that I thought had no real discernible talent, showed nothing special throughout the qualifying process or in the Gold Cup, or they didn't make it to the Nations League finals. This was not a team that was on the radar, and yet they've shown up and only lost 2 of their first 8 matches, including a home win against the United States. Canada beat them 4-1 though, so what do I know? Panama would be a really surprising inclusion, and what Panama is doing is making Mexico, the US, and Canada all nervous about their qualifying hopes, because nobody wants to go to that playoff when automatic qualification is this close, but it's a 2-point race for that playoff spot. Yikes. That's it with CONCACAF for now. The United States holding its own, thank goodness, so I don't have to pull my hair out over that. But none of those teams have actually managed to qualify for the World Cup yet. 0 Asian teams outside of Qatar, and 0 African teams and 0 CONCACAF teams have solidified their qualification for the World Cup. That is going to change with where we are headed next. See, we were about to come out with this video, but I was working in the Bahamas, as we do, and we realized the video was going to be over an hour long, and then we weren't going to be able to release a video every 2 days if, you know, we released an hour-long video that took forever to make. So, this is part 1. If you're watching this within the first 2 days, part 2's not out yet, sorry. But that will include the rest of the continents. If you are watching this after 2 days, and ignore this, part 2's right around the corner. It's probably in a neat little playlist. Go find it now and watch it. If you haven't lost any time, and we released a video every 2 days. Everybody's happy, and you get over an hour of content. Shout out to the editors. They do great work. Now back to walking